All right, Dr. Farney, it's all yours.
All right. Well, thank you for having me on, Katie, and look forward to sharing with you guys, although I forgot my topic, so probably not going to be able to continue. Wait a minute. I remember it was brain fog. So my one and only joke, I'll throw it out there right at the beginning. So I want to talk to you about something that's very common with chronic illness, and that is brain fog. We have, it's probably one of the main complaints that we see when, here with my slide here, hold on. There we go. One of the most common complaints that we see in chronic illness and here at the Biologix Center is brain fog. And I want to give you a quote, I think, from a very good book by Dr. Datis Karazian. You are your brain. The health of the brain dictates everything about you, how you perceive events in life, your personality, how much you enjoy your life, how you react to everyday occurrences, your emotional health, and so on. These are all determined by the health and function of your brain. This is super important. And for me, I believe not being able to use your brain is probably one of the most frustrating things that can happen. I can tolerate pain a lot more than I could tolerate fog. And having experienced this a lot, this is something I'm passionate about. So when we have brain fog, or when we have inflammation of the brain, we don't feel pain like we do in other areas of our body. The brain does feel fog. It feels this cognitive gap. It feels this reduction in function. And trying to figure out what's causing it is more important than other things, in my opinion, because if you can't think, you can't do the things that you need to do. So it is this inflammation that interrupts the normal processing, the normal cognition. It blocks the memory, blocks your thinking. And, you know, it's that whole word gap, trying to figure out what was it I was trying to say. And those people that are suffering with chronic illness, they'll know about this, where they have these thoughts that they want to say, but by the time it gets to their mouth, it's just gone. And so, but even driving and planning or shopping, it consumes so much of our life when we're dealing with this brain fog. Some of the symptoms that you may have experienced, these are just a short list. There's a host of them, but not being able to clearly think, debilitating mental fatigue, reduced cognition, decreased word call, distracted easily. Did somebody say something? A loss of that short-term and long-term memory. When you think about memories, you have to be able to focus long enough in order to make that turn into a memory. And so if you can't focus long enough because you don't have the mental energy to actually make these things happen, you're going to have a hard time remembering. Brain fog is associated with a lot of different disorders. It's either a part of it or it could be caused from some of these disorders. One of the big ones is decreased cerebral blood flow. Now, this is common when you have cardiovascular disease, when you've had injuries, when you've had cranial fixations. This can reduce the amount of flow going in and out of the brain. One of the things we try to do is make sure that you have good flow coming out of the brain, so that you're detoxing properly, so you're getting good blood flow into the brain and out of the brain, so that your nerve flow is going in and out. There's kind of a rhythm of what goes in and out of the brain on a daily basis. And if you have restrictions, either through cardiovascular disease, like atherosclerosis or arteriosclerosis, or if you have even cranial fixations where it reduces that flow, that can create a mental fatigue, a lack of energy, a lack of resources to the brain, and also a fog. Autism spectrum disorder is another one where irritability, anxiety, and this fog or this mental fog can affect these people that are dealing with this. Another one that it's associated with is chronic fatigue or fibromyalgia, myalgic encephalitis. This is kind of a triad here. You've got the muscle pain, you've got the body fatigue, but then you have the mental fatigue. And so trying to get at the core of that problem may help to solve the brain component of it as well. So once you start treating the fibromyalgia component of it, you may see that improves. Another big one is mast cell activation and histamine intolerance. This is very common, especially if the mast cells in the brain are activated or your microglia are activated. We're going to talk about those. An inability to break down histamine is an inability to get rid of inflammation. It is the same. You have histamine when it's in excess, it's going to cause inflammation, swelling, and a few other things. We mentioned a little bit already microglia activation. Your microglia are your glue of the brain and the glue cells, and they are involved with nerve function, but they're also involved with immune function. They can get triggered into a problem, and we're going to talk about that a little bit more as well. But when they are activated, they're going to lead to a lot of brain inflammation. The celiac and gluten sensitivity is another one because of the leaky gut problem that is associated with this. And when you have leaky gut, you're also going to have leaky brain. And we'll talk more in detail about that. Lastly, I want to just say that anytime you have a chronic joint inflammation throughout the body or some type of inflammatory process in your body, you're most likely dealing with brain problems. And when you clear that up, a lot of times you will actually see this brain inflammation go down as well. There are really four main factors that you need to look at when you're talking about brain fog. And then there's some minor factors we're going to address as well, but brain nutrition is important. Having the right nutrients in there, and stress is important, blood sugar problems, and brain inflammation. All four of these are areas that we try to address when we're trying to fix brain fog in people. And then the minor factors are going to be things like mitochondrial dysfunction, oxygen deprivation, which we're going to cover these, brain gut, leaky gut problems that we just mentioned, hormone imbalances, inflammation in the body, poor detox. Many people with chronic illness, unfortunately, are poor detoxifiers. So we have to address that issue if we're actually going to help the brain. And then a lack of neurotransmitters, dopamine, serotonin, these play a big role, not only in how we feel, but also our memory and our brain function. So let's break these down. Brain nutrition. The brain really just needs three things. It needs oxygen, glucose, and stimulation. So oxygen is going to come from breathing and also through conversion in the body. But there are things that actually reduce the flow of oxygen in the body. So as we've mentioned already, cardiovascular disease plays a big role in this. If you are having late stage cardiovascular disease, you're going to have brain fog. Even if you have reduced flow from cardiovascular disease, you're going to see some initial brain fog as well. But oxidative stress, we will talk a little bit more about this, but free radicals and a lack of antioxidants in your body is going to lead to this stress that can create damage to different tissues, especially if it's in the blood. This is going to reduce your oxygen capacity to the brain. Addressing that will be important. Anemia is another one. We see a lot of people in our blood work are either low on ferritin or they're low on their serum iron and hemoglobin. So when you're not processing iron very well, you're not going to have as big a capacity for oxygenation of the brain. The hemoglobin is kind of the taxi cab that carries the oxygen around the blood. And so if you don't have enough oxygen capacity, you're not going to have good oxidation of the brain there. Another one is poor methylation. There are several people that, because of either SNPs or because of changes that have happened throughout their life, their body is no longer methylating in certain areas, whether it be MTHFR, whether it be with homocysteine. Homocysteine in particular plays a role in detox, especially of ammonia. It also, if it's not working properly, will create an increase of other neurotransmitters that could be neuroexcitatory. So we want to work on methylation to make sure that the brain is working better. And blood pressure issues as well, whether they be high or low, this can affect your oxygenation to the brain. Lastly, stress can inhibit the flow. If you remember, the first thing you do when you're under stress, you start noticing you're not breathing as well. So you have to take time to take some more breaths. So we want to look at stress management if we're going to deal with supporting the brain. So brain nutrition is the most important thing for the brain is going to be glucose. It runs on glucose. And if you have an inability to manage your glucose, you're going to have a difficult time having a healthy functioning brain. When it goes bad, you usually have two major problems. You either have a hypoglycemic state or you have an insulin resistance. Now, hypoglycemia, we'll cover these more in here just a second, but this is going to be associated more with low cortisol, whereas your insulin resistance is going to be related to more high cortisol. And either of these can cause problems with neurotransmitters. They can cause problems with your mood and your brain function. So the last thing that the brain needs is healthy stimulation. We call that plasticity, or your ability to have ongoing learning. When we are learning things like a new task or a new skill, or maybe even today, you're doing a little bit of plasticity, learning some of these things that you may not know. This is a positive plasticity. So plasticity just means that the brain is plastic, it's moldable. They used to think that we were born with a certain number of neurons, and once those are gone, whether through drugs or alcohol, then they're gone. You're not going to be able to develop any new ones. Well, we now know that you're always making new neurons. So it's so important that you continue to learn. That's why these kind of programs are great, not only for learning, but or the actual material, but actually continuing to stimulate your brain. You always want to be using it. And I plan on using my brain for as long as I live. That's the one thing I don't want to go away. But the opposite of that is negative plasticity. And many people have had traumas, they've had stress in their life, they've had injuries, and this has created an adaptation in the body that creates a situation where they can easily get activated into a fight-flight scenario. We're going to talk about the amygdala and the hippocampus and the fight-flight center, but people that have had previous traumas are more readily triggered into this fight-flight from stress and anxiety. So when you're working on this plasticity, there's a lot of things that can help. There's Gupta programs, there's neurofeedback programs. DNRS is another program that can help with that. We'll touch on those a little bit later as well. But the idea here is that you want to continue to practice this and keep improving your brain and never stop learning. So stress and cortisol is a major player in this brain fog. When you have stress, you activate the immune system, releasing a cytokine called interleukin 6. And this midbrain area that I'm talking about with the hippocampus, the amygdala, this is rich with interleukin 6 receptors. When these get activated, this is going to create lots of inflammation in the brain. And it's usually activated through stress and through trauma. And you go into that traditional fight flight. So as you may already know, fight flight is kind of the opposite. And this is more sympathetic dominance. It's the opposite of parasympathetic, which is rest, digest, heal, repair, basically creating new things. So we want to be in parasympathetic a lot more than we want to be in sympathetic. We only want to be there if we have an emergency. So we want to control this response by controlling our cortisol, because cortisol, when it's released, will also increase it will also further complicate the problem. And that will eventually lead to more insulin resistance and hormone imbalance. So this just becomes a vicious cycle. Once you get the insulin resistance, you're going to have more cortisol and you're going to have more inflammation. So treating the brain becomes a systems problem. We have to look at all these factors and help them or fix them so that we can get the brain to work better. It's not just a simple pill. So touching a little bit more on these blood sugar imbalances, you've probably heard of both of these terms. The hypoglycemia is a lowered glucose, and it's usually because of a mismanagement of insulin. This can be a genetic problem. It can also be come from chronic illness as well. But generally, these people will see and they'll have fatigue and they'll have irritability if they miss a meal or in between, if they go too long before they eat. And so they usually have to eat a little bit of something every couple of hours. So the unfortunate thing is many people are eating carbohydrates, which are just further magnifying the problem. We need to work on maybe a protein or a fat to keep that blood sugar level and still feed the body. The opposite of that is more insulin resistance. This is where you're going to have elevated glucose. This is due to our poor diet and our stress and our elevated cortisol. So our standard American diet and our standard lifestyle is pretty much go, go, go. So we have to start to change this. We have to look at the foods we're eating. We have to look at our lifestyle, start living more in balance. Unfortunately, I guess a lot of people with chronic illness have already kind of addressed this issue. So that's not the only factor, but there are many people out there that are still eating a lot of sugar. They're having major stresses in their lives and they're not addressing that. And this is creating a problem with the brain. These people generally will have fatigue after eating a meal. And so we've got to look at things like intermittent fasting. You got to look at exercise to try to fix this problem, and obviously eliminating sugar from the diet. So other factors that are involved with the brain inflammation, as we talked about already, body inflammation. If you've been injured, let's say you have a knee problem that Borrelia has gone after and it's torn up that joint and you have this chronic inflammation, this could be contributing back to the brain inflammation. So until you treat that problem, you're not going to get rid of this inflammation. Excessive alcohol consumption, this increases acetaldehyde and reactive oxygen species. This is something you've got to address as well. If we get back to the oxidative stress that comes from the reactive oxygen species. If you're drinking an excess amount, that's going to be a problem. It's going to create some brain inflammation. And as we've also touched on, the microglia cells, these are the brain glue. They get activated with stress and with injury, and they will stay activated unless you do something to bring that down. There are products that actually are designed to bring that microglia activation down and get this inflammation down. We'll talk about in a bit. Excessive zonulin and leaky gut. So zonulin is released when you have excess amount of histamine. Histamine is usually there when you're reacting to some food. But generally, it's because you already have a leaky gut. And a leaky gut is where you have gaps in the wall that allows larger food particles to get through. And that creates this inflammation and immune reaction. This ongoing leaky gut can eventually lead to a leaky brain. And if you have a leaky brain, you're going to have toxins coming in and out of the brain. You're going to have bacteria coming in and out of the brain. So that has to get shut down quickly, get that brain safe again. But the other things that can also wreck the gut besides just foods, mold, mycotoxins, bacteria, they will often, and yeast overgrowth will wreck the gut as well. So looking at those things and treating those are going to help the leaky gut and eventually the leaky brain and eventually brain inflammation. This is a new one, the COVID, and there are several people, unfortunately, that they're dealing with this long haul syndrome with COVID. And there's quite a bit of them that are dealing with brain inflammation. This is related to some of those same pathways we're discussing. You're having the microglia activated. You're having the problems with the viral component there. This is contributing to the continuous inflammation. There have been a few studies that I'm going to talk about here when I get to the questions that actually are supporting this brain inflammation coming from COVID. And ultimately, diabetes is going to create brain inflammation, just as insulin resistance did as well. So diabetes is just kind of the worsening condition of insulin resistance. And we've already kind of mentioned the methylation and homocysteine issue. So let's talk about mitochondria. The mitochondria are probably the most important things that we have to address when it comes to the processes of the body. They are running everything. Any detox programs that you have going, any cleanup that you have to have done, any exercises you have to do, you're going to have mitochondria. If you need to be able to think, you got to have mitochondria. And unfortunately, with chronic illness, you see a lot of this suppressed. They're either damaged or the body's not able to make them. And so we want to get these built up so that you have more energy resources. This is part of the systems approach that we like to take. And so understand that the mitochondria will communicate with each other via light packets. And we want to make sure that your body has that ability to make enough of the mitochondria. Another thing that is interesting, recent research on leaky gut and microflora are the kind of bacteria in your gut. There are studies on Firmicutes and Bacteroidetes. These are two major populations in the gut that they have found problems with. So they did studies on these obese versus thin mice, and the obese had more Firmicutes and less Bacteroidetes populations in their gut, and the mice that were thin were a reverse of that. They also found another study where the mice of these aggressive mice had more of the Firmicutes and less of the Bacteroidetes. Well, they did some switching, and so they took they withdrew a sample from the thin mice and put that from the microflora and put that into the obese mice. And also same thing with the kind of introverted and kind of not necessarily introverted, but more just kind of like very calm mice, and put it into the very aggressive and active mice. And then they did the opposite of that. They switched those. So what they found when they put more, when they gave the mice more Bacteroidetes, they found that they became thin and they became kind of calm and less aggressive. And so, and then the opposite happened with the other mice. So this is an important thing to think about. If that can change not only their personality per se, and whether or not they're obese or thin, what else is this doing for our brain? So, we've heard of the gut being our third brain, but this is a huge deal. Now, they haven't done human studies, so we don't know if this transfers over to that, but very fascinating. The interesting thing is there are things like polyphenols that actually help to build more of the Bacteroidetes. Polyphenols are things in chocolate. There's a reason to have a little bit of chocolate. They're also in your dark fruits, like your berries, your blackberries, blueberries, your red apples, and you also find in coffee, believe it or not. And so these will actually help you to build the right population. Now, I'm all about taking probiotics, but I'm also about building the right population using food. I believe we were designed, this is my philosophy, but we were designed to live in this world without a lot of extra help from people like me. We were designed to be able to, eat good, exercise, have everything working properly, and we don't really need a lot of extra support. So the more ways that we can do this naturally through foods, provided you're taking in organic foods, the better off instead of just taking a supplement. All right. So building the right population is going to be important for having a healthy brain. These polyphenols will also build butyrate, which I'll talk about in a second. And then we've mentioned already the insulin resistance will lead to this brain inflammation. If you have a good, what they're also finding is this insulin resistance is related to this imbalance in the microflora as well. So building the right kind of microflora is going to be important. So butyrate is what is made from these good bacteria. And when you make the butyrate, you're going to have a healthy brain function, healthy nerve function, healthy lipid metabolism, healthy function of hormones. Now, butyrate does also come from grass-fed butter and ghee. That's something you could also take to build that up. I like to do a bulletproof coffee where I have the really good coffee. I'll have some caprylic acid and I'll have a little bit of grass-fed butter. That helps to build more of that. It helps with my brain. And then I will eat for sure the berries, the dark berries. I've just discovered that if you freeze your blackberries, it's almost like having ice cream. So being without sugar, and then when you start having some real sugar, it's just really good. Detox is an important thing here that blocks people from having good brain function. As I mentioned already, many people with chronic illness have poor detoxification pathways and poor detoxification ability. In fact, some people that struggle with mold, 25% of the population, have a certain SNP, the HLA-DQ, that prevents them from really opening up the pathway to clear mold out of their body. So addressing those issues are going to be important, not only for them to feel better in other areas of the body, but also for their brain to work. And as we've mentioned a little bit already, neurotransmitters are super important. Dopamine is your motivation molecule. And if you are not making enough dopamine because your gut is out of balance, which most of your neurotransmitters are made in the gut and then transferred to the brain, or if you're having a leaky gut, this is going to reduce the amount of dopamine that you have in your system. Now, dopamine is critical for making memory, all right? And so if you can't make that, that's a big problem. And that's an area we've got to work on. Serotonin is also the happy pill. They're a happy molecule. If you're not making enough serotonin, you're going to have a hard time wanting to get up and do anything. You're also going to be trying to do things to suppress that, like, or to fix that problem, like alcohol and other things. So we have to address the neurotransmitters as well. So getting into support, the cool thing about this is a lot of these things can be done at home. The other nice thing is that here at the Biologix Center, we do all of these. This is part of our systems approach. And when you're treating brain fog, you can't look at it as a single linear problem, meaning that you have this brain fog, you go to this expert, he or she gives you this protocol that's built for brain fog, and then you have this expected outcome. As you should already be able to see by now, there are too many things affecting brain fog to say that there's one pill or one supplement that's actually going to solve this problem. And as we go into this here, I want you to kind of see that there are a lot of things that are at your disposal that you can actually do to help you. So some of them that we have here, the beamers and the hyperbaric oxygen therapies, these will increase the blood oxygen concentration, that'll improve blood flow and get more oxygen to the brain. So the hyperbaric chambers actually press that oxygen in, which is really good, not only for giving you oxygen, but also killing some of the bacteria that might be affecting you. Saunas are also an important thing. Now, some people can't tolerate the heat, but what I suggest that you do is, as long as you're in an infrared sauna, turn the temperature down and still get in there, because it does something super important besides detox, and that is building exclusion zone water, this easy water. Many of you may not have heard of this, but this is a recent discovery in the last 10 years or so. And what they found is this is a fourth form of water. You know, you've got the steam or the gas, you've got the liquid, and you've got the solid. Well, this is kind of a blend of the liquid and solid that is basically what we have in our cells. And this is what our mitochondria are dependent on. Many people that come to us have dehydration, and I believe it's not because they're not drinking enough water, because they're usually carrying these buckets in that they're drinking, but it's because of this right here. You're not converting enough of that water into the type of water that your body needs in your cells, and the type of water the mitochondria need, and that is easy water. So you can get this through the infrared saunas that are at the 1200 nanometers. You can they also have handheld devices that have a red light and also infrared light that you could use as well. So you didn't have to get in a sauna. But it is this easy water that is going to decrease the viscosity of blood and lymph, which the lymphatic system and the blood, if those are not moving, you're not detoxing very well. You're not getting rid of inflammation. It just gets stuck and stagnant. So we want to improve the movement of the lymph, and we want to improve the movement of the blood as well as detox, so that we can get this inflammation and everything going. So this helps to improve that, and then it'll also help to move things through the body better. Another thing that is easy and very affordable is grounding. This is something that allows us to balance our ions When we are around EMFs, which we're around all day long, electromagnetic fields, they are creating a lot of positive charges in our body, and we're having an excess of these charges. Well, at the same time, we're all wearing shoes that have rubber soles. We're sleeping on beds that are elevated off the ground. We're not getting outside, obviously now because of ticks, but we're not getting outside and we're not getting barefoot. So you need to get out there. You can do this on concrete, but it's better on wet grass. Obviously, you'd want to spray if you're going to be going very far into the grass for fear of ticks and stuff. But if you're grounding for about 30 to 40 minutes a day, you're going to be really improving many things, including the easy water that I just talked about, including decreasing inflammation, decongesting the blood that often gets clumped. You can see some studies on there if you go and watch Earthing movie. That this is something I do all day long. I sleep on a pad under my sheet. And then I also have a pad behind my table when I'm working on patients. I'll take my shoes off. I'll still have socks on for their sake, but I'll take my shoes off and I'll just stand on those. And what I found that by doing this, the swelling that I would have at the end of the day of being on my feet all day long, the varicose veins that I was dealing with, and the fatigue that I would get from standing is gone. Now, I also will work out on the weekends, and I'll take my shoes and socks off, and I'll be on concrete there, and I'll do my weightlifting there. So try to get as much grounding as possible. Preferably, if we could all just run to the beach, that'd be great. That'd be the best place for it. But anywhere, even fresh water, salt water, it doesn't really matter. Just getting out there, getting in the water, getting on the ground, you're going to help everything work better. Level laser has been studied a lot. This helps to decrease inflammation. There's a cheap way to do this. Obviously, we have programmable lasers that we use here, but you can take one of those pin lights that you irritate your cat with, right? And actually shine it on yourself for a minute. And I would put it on like every area of my brain. So I just kind of set a timer, and while you're watching show or whatever you like to do, listen to podcasts, maybe the Marion Institute, you could be just hitting a minute on each area, each lobe of your brain, and you can help improve your mitochondrial function and decrease your inflammation. By far, the most important thing I think that you can do is going on a low inflammation diet. Now, I may be preaching to the choir a little bit here because many people with chronic illness have already cut out grains. They've already cut out a lot of sugar. But I believe that this is an area that can improve your brain fog dramatically. I just recently finished a carnivore diet, also an anti-inflammatory diet. I was dealing with candida, yeast, toxins, and I was having an inability to lose weight. So I went on it for 90 days, which I would not necessarily recommend. It's kind of hard, but getting grains, getting lectins, getting oxalates out of your diet, getting rid of sugars, and all your milk products will take a lot of this down. And then what you can do, if you've done this for about 6 to 12 weeks, you can add that back in to your diet. And then you can start to see which one of these things are actually contributing to some of your inflammation and to some of your fog. I strongly encourage this as a trial. It's not a permanent thing you want to do. You definitely don't want to be on this forever. But for me, sugar is going to stay out of my diet, and grains are out of my diet as well, because I believe most of the grains are modified nowadays. There are some European grains and stuff that are a little bit better. But for me, having a gluten sensitivity, I just try to keep that out of diet. I have a little bit of milk, and I will have I will have some fruits and vegetables. Now, the oxalates are also a little bit controversial. They may or may not be causing issues. I would just take them out just for that 6 to 12 weeks and then reintroduce them back in one at a time to see if you are reacting to those foods. Well, this will definitely decrease the inflammation, and then adding in omega-3s will also help that as well. So this will help improve your gut, but also you need to take some steps to improve your leaky gut. If it's coming from toxins or mold, you've got to address those issues. If it's just a gut that's been leaky, there are some products that you can get that actually help to repair that, like diglyceride licorice, and a few other things that can help. But the grass-fed butter can also help rebuild the gut and also help with microflora. As we mentioned already, polyphenols are also helpful in building that right population and building butyrate to help balance that gut. So healing that is going to help to heal the leaky brain and eventually help with the brain inflammation. Another important factor is sleep. And unfortunately for some of you, sleep just doesn't come easy. So whatever you can do to help with sleep is going to help you eventually with your brain fog. But it's during sleep that we do a lot of repair and we take the trash out. There's a process called mitophagy, which is a type of autophagy. This helps to break down worn out mitochondria and helps to restore some of those back to a better function. So we have to spend some time resting. We really want to have a consistent pattern. You know, we were meant to go down when the sun goes down and get up when the sun goes up. With our lifestyles now, that's a little bit different. But if you can have a sleeping pattern, really the most important thing is waking up at the same exact time. I used to get up early for work during the week, and on the weekends I'd sleep in. Well, I've switched to where I'm getting up at the same time every day in the morning, which is really helpful, even if you're not able to control as much when you go to bed. But ideally, you want to get about 7 hours of sleep so your body has time to repair. It shuts down the digestive tract and a lot of the other processes so it can really focus on repair. Detox, as we've already kind of alluded to, is very helpful in getting rid of toxins, and it's going to help to take that inflammation down. This has to be a key component. Our environment is loaded with toxins. There's at least 80,000 chemicals in our environment that we're being exposed to all day. Between that and the EMFs and the foods, the crappy food that we have available, we're really need to take a proactive role in keeping ourselves healthy. There's not such a thing as just eating right and exercising. You actually have to be proactive about getting rid of these toxins. So doing some occasional liver cleanses, getting a sauna or getting access to a sauna on a regular basis so you can purge this stuff out of your body, and doing some things that are going to help you to improve that will be good. Red light therapy, as we've touched on a little bit, there's a device that you can have that actually you can put on there that actually helps to boost and charge up the mitochondria as well. Getting outside, as we touched on already, grounding, ideally getting the vitamin D and getting UV light. This is important. We've been poo-pooing UV light for years. And obviously you want to be careful about being out there, but you also need to have a little bit of exposure, at least 10 to 15 minutes of sun exposure without any protection. And so ideally you're going to do this in the earlier morning, somewhere around 10 to 11. That way it's not so intense, but you definitely want to get outside and get some vitamin D and get that grounding while you're at it. Lastly, I want to talk about neurophotonic therapy. This is a cool thing that we do here. I mentioned already a little bit that the mitochondria communicate via light packets. So we have, they release these biophotons that actually communicate with other mitochondria. Well, bacteria also release these same packets and communicate. So if we want to help our patients to deal with the bacteria and support the mitochondria, we'll use these goggles where we actually look at different color frequencies, and we'll test for any deficiencies, for any energy blocks, or any inability to allow that light to flow through the body, all the different frequencies. We believe that the light was meant to be used in the body as a source of communication and also a source of energy. So if you're not able to process that through, which by the way, you have millions of receptors in your skin for light. So if we're not meant to use light, we wouldn't have all of those receptors, but your eyes have different colors, receptors as well. And so we test those different receptors to see if there's good communication capacity for the body. This will help the body to clear bacteria a little bit easier and also help the mitochondria to work at a better level. So here at the Biologix Center, we really have three main goals. And this is what I tell my clients all the time. What I want to do is help you to decrease the overall burden on the body, whether they be toxins, whether they be bacteria, whether they be mold, whether they be traumas, whether they be emotional stressors. All these are loading the body down. I believe that the body was built to be able to sustain itself in this environment, provided we're doing the right things that we already know to do. But if you have this burden, at some point it breaks down and it no longer works. It's kind of a broken system. And so that's where people like me need to come in and help. But if we can decrease that burden, we're going to help the body work better. Also, I want to improve the overall communication. I want to make sure that your nervous system is working properly, your endocrine system, and also how you're processing light. These are all important. All the cells are communicating all the time. And if they're not, there's a problem. And lastly, I want to empower your body with energy resources. Not only remove things that are draining your energy, but also give you borrowed resources and borrowed energy until your body can get working again. It's based on this idea that our body is a garden, and we have to tend to the whole garden, not just one part of the body. Okay, it's not a machine. It's something that's working together, connected. And so what we want to do is empower that system and help it to get back to doing what it does best: rest, digest, heal, repair, and detox. So what are some steps that you can do that might help you to begin? You might want to do some testing to find out what might be causing your fog. Cyrix Labs has antibody testing for zonulin, lipopolysaccharides, occludin, actomyosin. These things are contributing to leaky gut if you want to know if you're dealing with a leaky gut. Glucose and insulin panels are also going to be beneficial if you're dealing with hypoglycemia or insulin resistance. Also, your urine mycotoxins and metals panels. These allow us to see if you're loaded down with toxins. A Felix lab test would allow us to be able to see what kind of bacteria is going on in the body, and then antibody testing for environmental toxins. These are all great tests that would give us information, give you information to see kind of what you're dealing with. All right. But more importantly, I think if you can just take one or two of these solutions and start doing them today, I think you'll start improving your brain fog. Like I said, this is a systems problem. It's not one thing. So you may have to do multiple things. You may have to get some advice from a local practitioner or something, but start working on some of these today, and I think you'll start to feel some improvement. A couple other things I do want to just mention. This is probably one of my favorite products for brain inflammation, called Neuroflam. There are other products out there as well, but this has a lot of the bioflavonoids in there that actually help to deactivate the microglia. And so there are plenty of nutritional things that that can help you as well. You know, your adaptogens are going to be beneficial. Also, things like ginkgo biloba and a few other lion's manes. There's quite a few things that can help there. So with that, I will stop with my lecture here and take some time for questions.
Awesome. Dr. Farney, thank you so much. There's a lot of information. I want to acknowledge there was a question just now asking how you might get in touch with Dr. Farney. And Dr. Farney, while I transition, if you could just stop sharing just so we can see.
Yeah, I mean,
it's kind of a nice thing. I'm going to put the link to Biologix in the chat box. There we go.
Can you see me now? No?
I can see you. I still see your slideshow though. Hold on, let's see.
Let me shut that down here.
Here, I got it. There we
okay,
go.
perfect. Thanks.
You can reach out to Biologix at their website or by phone, and they can guide you from there. Additionally, the Marion Institute, you know, if you're constrained in some way and need additional support in funding the resources that work for you, you can give us a call. I'm going to put our website in the chat box as well. We have a lot of resources on our website, videos from Dr. Farney and his colleagues on a number of topics that have come up today, including HIT, mast cell activation, what else? Lyme disease, you know, things that encourage inflammation, and you might be struggling with those as well. So again, please do feel welcome to reach out to Biologix or us here at the Marion Institute, and we'll assist in whatever way we can. Okay, this is like rapid fire questions now because I let you go. but you had a lot, which is great.
Yeah.
But we have a lot of questions. And so I apologize. I will preface by saying this is recorded. And next Tuesday, my wingman, Chris, who's on this call, will be posting this video content to YouTube. We'll be sharing links to it with you all who have registered via email. So if you want to just tune in for a minute mentally, feel welcome, and you'll have an opportunity to revisit this talk by next week. Okay, let's start with COVID, because that's the number one thing. It came up a few times in different questions. I'm going to see if I can combine them, but basically, one person asked whether there's a correlation between having COVID and experiencing brain fog. And then, the predominant question was, is this something that can be reversed or treated?
Okay. So I want to mention one other thing real quick. You can follow me on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. I try to post small videos there, that just little informative videos. So, but yes, COVID is a big thing now, and even just the post-COVID syndrome. But the long haul for the COVID brain fog, that there has at least been 1 or 2 studies done on that. They're the same one that came up with the product Neuroprotect, Theodotes. He did a research on luteolin, which is a supplement that is in his Neuroprotect. It's also in this Neuroflam. It's one of the products. That is something that's been very beneficial, or showed beneficial for people with that brain fog associated with COVID. And then you asked if there's correlation between that. For sure, there's a correlation. There are cytokines that get released when you have COVID. These cytokines will activate the microglia. That we talked about the microglia. When they're activated, they're going to create a host of brain inflammation. The unfortunate thing is it sometimes takes a long time before these actually get calmed down. So we try to do some things to help settle the cytokines down along with the brain inflammation. Beautiful. Was there another question there that I?
Well, I think it was both. It was, are they related and how do you treat it? And I think you kind of covered both. I don't know if there's anything more you want to say.
So I would say a little bit more on the treatment. What we try to address is looking deep into that. There's actually some testing that you can do. An innovative bioanalysis is a lab that looks at a cytokine panel that's been associated with COVID. And so getting that information first would be helpful. VEGF is another one that can give us some valid information as far as what's happening with post-COVID. So once you have that information, then we can take and find, okay, what kind of solutions, besides the luteolin, we also want to look at what's creating this chronic inflammation throughout the body. And, we might look at things like fish oil. We might look at some quercetin or other bioflavonoids. We might look at selenium. We might look at some other natural things that could help support the immune system, which indirectly might help with those symptoms.
Okay, beautiful. All right, and again, we'll be typing up notes as well. So for those specific treatment options and recommendations, we'll have those typed out for you. Another question, how do you differentiate between brain fog based on inflammation imbalance or the other things that lead to brain fog? And then also, or is it what you're really saying that it's all kind of inflammation to some degree, just caused by different things?
Well, the unfortunate thing is we can't, some of the testing we do here, we can kind of break that out a little bit more, but unless you do some of this testing we're talking about, it's hard to tell where it may be coming from. But some of it's unfortunately trial and error, and we try to include all of it in our treatment so that we're covering all of our bases. So a lot of times you can't really separate out what the cause is. We want to treat as many of these things as possible to help.
Great. All right. I have now received like 4 different questions that are just, is blank related to brain inflammation or brain fog? So I'm just going to read them off and you can yes, no, or explain. But the first one, are parasites causal of brain fog or a cause of brain fog?
They could be a contributing factor because they're going to create leaky gut. They're going to create inflammation throughout the body. They're going to release toxins. They're going to release bacteria. So yes, they could be a causal factor.
Okay. What about mercury?
For sure. It's going to be that heavy metal toxicity, especially if it ends up getting taken up in the brain. So, yeah.
I will add at this particular moment that the Marion Institute's BioMed network has quite a number of practitioners who practice safe amalgam removal and can help if you are struggling with mercury toxicity. So that's another way that we might be able to be useful here.
That's definitely an area we look at too. We want to make sure that they get to a biologic dentist and address that. Beautiful.
All right. What about menopause? Is menopause a contributor to brain fog?
Yep, because of the hormone imbalance. It's interesting. I was studying about the some of the different cultures that really don't have a word for menopause, and this is related actually to grounding. They would sleep on the floor. They would on the ground. They would spend a lot of time walking on the ground barefoot. That seemed to balance their hormones a little bit better. Now, we do know that that imbalance is going to lead to brain fog in particular. So trying to help give the body some help. One of the things I forgot to mention is actually progesterone and testosterone. When they are in good amounts, they will actually suppress the brain inflammation. When they are low and estrogen's high, then you're going to have more brain inflammation. So for sure, that's a connection.
No, and another side comment, that last month's talk was on restoring hormonal balance. So if you have questions about that, you might revisit our resources page and look at that talk as well. All right, last one in this laundry list was tinnitus. Is tinnitus related to brain fog?
It's not a direct correlation, but it's an associated condition. So we've found that mycotoxins, we've found that bacteria, we've found that heavy metals contribute to that problem, but it is neural inflammation. And so the same product that helps with that could also help with the tinnitus or tinnitus. And but it's not the same. It's the cranial nerve 8 that's being affected, whereas the brain fog's more of a global, but it's probably part of the problem as well. So.
Okay, right. Hey, Dr. Farney, briefly before I ask this next question, if we go a few minutes over, do you have the time to bear with us?
I'm good.
The extra minutes?
Yeah.
Okay. We won't hold people long. If you got to go, you got to go. And we are glad to have had your participation, but I want to try and at least get to these questions that were asked ahead of time. I have just a few more. Someone had been reading about frequency-specific electromagnetic therapy for inflammation and wondered if this therapy might be used to reduce inflammation in the brain.
It's possible. I've not seen a lot of studies on it, but I've seen it where it actually helps with inflammation. Essentially, what they're doing is they're feeding the frequencies into the body to either kill a bacteria or reduce inflammation. So I could say theoretically that it would do that. I don't have a lot of experience with that, nor have I seen a lot of research. That doesn't mean that it wouldn't help.
Sure. Okay. Thank you. All right. I have another individual who indicates that they regularly experience brain fog, particularly in certain situations, for instance, as a symptom of motion sickness in a car or some other means of transportation, as a symptom of perimenopause, as a symptom of severe headaches or migraines. And their question is it possible that one might have a genetic predisposition to brain fog? I think maybe given that it's happening in kind of these different in relation to these different aspects of their life.
To me, it seems more likely that it's a series of traumas, infections, blood sugar issues. It's a combination of a lot of these things. My opinion of genes, and this is kind of been the big disappointment when they did this great genome project, is they were hoping that once they figured out all these genes that they were going to be able to have a solution for every problem that we have. And they figured out, nope, we don't have a solution. And to me, they're finding more that it's the epigenetics or the environment that's affecting the switches of the genes that is influencing it. So in a sense, if you have traumas, if you have infections, they switch certain genes off, which then could potentially make you susceptible to brain fog. But it's the environmental problem, what's happened in your life. And if you can fix that problem, you should be able to switch that back off or back on, whatever it is.
Interesting. Okay. Another question was whether massage therapy can help. And I want to leave that question as it is, but also add, and I don't know whether you call it G-lymphatic or lymphatic massage or with respect to lymphatic vessels. So does massage therapy help? And more specifically, does massage of the cranium or the brain help?
Yes, we've seen it here. We do lymphatic massage as part of our treatment. And again, if you get that lymph moving and if you allow for, and the other thing we do is we do this cranial percussion in the treatment room, which opens up that flow in and out of the brain, the lymphatics that you were talking about. So if you address that, you're definitely going to improve the movement of things out of the brain, which are toxins that are contributing to the brain fog. So yes, you're going to directly help that.
Okay. Just a few more questions to go here. But one was asking, I guess one's asking about the impact of chronic stress on brain fog. It's something that you have talked about, but I guess the real question is, what might your advice be to someone who's experiencing both chronic stress and brain fog?
Like me? Yeah. So I took a product called phosphatidylserine. This is a really good counteracting of cortisol and stress. I also take quite a few adaptogens, ashwagandha, and I take ginkgo biloba, and I take magnesium. But this is a very common problem. Like I said, our standard lifestyle is go, 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 and we don't have time for anything. But you've got to manage the stress, yoga, meditation, a lot of these techniques, the breathing techniques, we didn't even get into those, but these are all helpful. But then you have things like your adaptogens. You've got I take pyridoxal 5-phosphate before bed. I take lots of vitamin C. These are all going to be things that are going to help me manage cortisol. But for me, the big thing was getting rid of sugar. It was creating a lot of stress in my life. I was a sugar addict. And so I got that out of my diet. That helped quite a bit. And obviously I try to exercise. Some people can't do that. They don't have the energy, or they have too much pain. But you'd be surprised that even just walking in the mailbox and back could do a number on cortisol, or getting in a pool and just kind of moving your arms a little bit, or breathing exercises, or meditation. There's so many things that you can help with that. But those are some of the things I would recommend.
Beautiful. I appreciate that. I'm sure we can all on some level relate to that, right? Managing stress is a challenge. The last question that I have here asks about something that you referenced earlier, which is EMF exposure, cell phones, antennas, 5G networks. Thinking about this specifically, for someone who's concerned about this and the way it's impacting their brain health, is there anything that you might recommend?
Yes, there's plenty of things. There's, you can get really aggressive and have a Faraday cage that you sleep in. You can rewire your outlets to where you can switch off the part where you're sleeping in. Definitely want to shut off. I bought one of those old timers that I plug my Wi-Fi into. So at like 10 o'clock at night, it shuts off. And then in the morning at 7 or 8 o'clock, it turns back on. So you can do that. You've got things like this for your phone, this safe sleeve that I use for my phone. You've got things for your computer. Radiant Room is one of the websites we've recommended people go to. That'll kind of put out a buffering wave that kind of helps block the EMFs. But you also want to unplug your lamps. Believe it or not, if you look online, they have a video of this guy that used a meter to measure the output of the lamp, and it creates quite a bit of voltage in our body just with the lamp off. So using that, but Radiant Room has a lot of these plugins that'll actually help with the room itself. They also have clothes now, shirts you can wear if you're being exposed to it. But I think the grounding is one of the biggest things, and it's easy and it's cheap, and you can ground. So if you have to sit in front of a computer like you probably, Katie, you'll have a pad like this. Let me show you my pad. So it just kind of looks like this, and I just stand on it, or you could actually put it right below your computer and just put your feet on it. And it's been tested really well by cardiologists and things like that. So Clint Ober is the one that kind of I read his book and did look at his research there. So that would be a good thing.
Awesome. All right. I was like rapid fire Q&A, but thank you. You hung in well.
All right.
All right. Well, that brings us to the end, and I know we're past time. So I thank you, Dr. Farney, for those extra minutes of your time, which is quite valuable. And again, those of you who are joined today, my colleague Chris just posted a note that our next month's topic is on parenting in challenging times with Maureen Burford, who is founder and director of Creative Lives, a Vermont-based nonprofit that works with educators and parents to develop techniques to parent in a healthy way and again, help grow healthy young people into healthy adults. We hope you'll consider joining us for that one. Dr. Farney, again, thank you. It's a pleasure to have you as always, and we wish you well.
Thank you. Have a good day, guys.
All right. Bye all.
Thank you.
Thank you.